The rhythmic lull of Manila was a lullaby to Alina. The city's energy thrummed in the steady beep of monitors. The hushed murmur of the chronically ill, the gentle crash of waves along the bay. In the sterile corridors of Manila's urban hospitals, Alina thrived. Her crisp white nurse's uniform was a second skin, her quick mind navigating the chaos with practiced ease. But when a phone call sliced through the urban hum, carrying the news of her Nenea's sudden illness, a fever that had the old woman delirious, Alina's world lurched. The call also carried urgency, an implicit demand for help. And so, within hours, Alina found herself on a bus hurtling away from the city. Hours later, the bus deposited her at the foot of a weathered hospital building. It was low and squat, a world away from the towering structures of Manila. The paint on the walls was peeling, the corrugated iron roof sagging in the middle. Above the entrance, the words San Vicente Hospital were scrunched together, as if in a hurry to escape the building's oppressive gloom. A lone, flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the cracked tiles below. The air hung heavy with the smell of antiseptic and rain-soaked earth, a potent mix that spoke of lives lived on the edge of the wild. "I am here, Poe," she said to the vacant room, her voice echoing in the stillness. From out of the corner, a portly woman emerged. Her face was a landscape of wrinkles, her eyes crinkling at the corners like a warm smile. "Ah, Alina, you came. Come in, child, come in." Her name was Tita Lourdes, the head nurse, and she ushered Alina into an office, cluttered with papers and folders. "Welcome to San Vicente, huh? It's quieter here, but the nights tell their own stories." Her words hung in the air, a cryptic welcome to a place that seemed determined to keep its secrets close. Outside, the tropical night pressed against the windows. The wind whispered tales of the sprawling neogan that fringed the horizon, a sea of green whispering in the darkness. Alina's city-honed skepticism was a shield against Tita Lourdes' enigmatic words. But as night deepened, the hospital grew quiet, too quiet. The wards were empty, their beds neatly made. The 4 stands stood sentinel, draped in white, but there were no patients. The staff, a handful of weary faces, moved with the languid grace of those who knew the rhythms of the province. Their whispers carried snippets of life outside the hospital walls, the taste of a freshly blended salabat, the banter of a basketball game. Even the rain outside seemed part of this timeless melody. As midnight approached, Alina felt the silence pressing in on her, punctuated only by the distant rumble of thunder. From the forest beyond the barrio, mournful cries carried on the wind, stirring something primal in her chest. Rain lashed against the windows, blurring the world outside into a watercolor wash. The forest, a dark, looming presence, seemed to claw at the edges of the clearing, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Alina shook off the unease, focusing on the task at hand. She reviewed patient charts, their names and ailments, a stark reminder of the hospital's purpose. But the orderly's casual mention of Aswang's shape-shifting creatures of the night lingered in her mind. His casual words painted vivid images of terror, tales that were more nightmare than reality. Yet as she glanced at the windows, the darkened silhouettes of the trees swayed ominously in the wind, seeming to writhe and twist into menacing shapes. The very walls of the hospital seemed to whisper of hidden things, of ancient fears that had found purchase in the minds of men. In the dimly lit break room, Tita Lourdes crossed herself before lighting a candle, her lips moving in silent prayer. The storm outside reached a crescendo, and for a moment, Alina felt utterly alone. A city girl, trapped in a world of shadows and whispers. The rhythmic tap, tap, tap of a tinderong delivering supplies broke the silence. He stood hesitantly in the doorway, his gaze darting from the storm-tossed window to the faces of the women in the room. His words Paciencia, Napo, late Napo, Ako, seemed to hang heavy in the air, laden with unspoken meanings. Alina's rational mind dismissed them as superstitious nonsense. Yet she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder at the retreating figure. The hospital was a tableau of flickering shadows and hushed voices. A place where the line between the natural and the supernatural was alarmingly thin. And as the storm raged on, Alina found herself not just fighting for her patients, but for a piece of her own sanity. The storm battered San Vicente's lone hospital, its old bones aching as the wind howled through cracked windows and rain lashed against the glass panes. Just past midnight, the emergency room doors slammed open, and 3 men rushed in, their faces pale, their steps hurried. They carried a young man on a makeshift stretcher, his limbs dangling loosely, his chest marred by deep claw-like scratches that oozed blood. "Help him, Poe. Please help him," one of the men pleaded, his voice cracking with urgency. Lena, a nurse with city-honed instincts, took charge, her gaze sweeping over the injured man, assessing. "Bring him to the bed. Put him down gently." She barked orders at the doctors and nurses, her tone sharp, efficient. The men scrambled to comply, their movements clumsy, their eyes darting nervously around the room. As Rico was laid down on the emergency room bed, Alina knelt beside him, checking for a pulse, his skin unnaturally pale, almost translucent. She found a faint heartbeat, steady but weak. "I need 4 fluids stat, and get the OB nurse to prep for a blood transfusion." Stat. The doctors and nurses moved with practiced efficiency, their movements a well-rehearsed dance of medical expertise. As Alina cleaned his wounds, she noticed the scratches on his chest were closing faster than any she'd seen. The skin knit together, as if by magic, revealing barely a scar beneath his torn shirt. Her hands paused, a sudden chill creeping up her spine. Rico's eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly in the dim light. Startled, she looked away, blaming the flickering fluorescence for the strange glimmer. But when she turned back, the glow was still there, an unnatural luminescence that seemed to emanate from his very being. An elderly woman who had been standing by the bed, Tita Lords, hurriedly crossed herself, her lips moving in silent prayer. "He carries the Aswang scent," a deep voice echoed in the room. Lena turned to find a wizened old man standing in the doorway. His face was etched with the hardships of a life well lived, his eyes holding a knowing glint. Round his neck a myriad of colorful beads glistened, each one a testament to his years as an albulario, a traditional Filipino healer. She shook off her surprise, returning her focus to the task at hand. "We're doing everything we can," she said, her voice firm, although her hands trembled slightly, betraying her composure. Outside, the wind continued its furious assault on the hospital, rain battering the roof, shaking the very foundations of the building. Inside, the atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation as the albulario, known locally as Man Albulario, stepped further into the room. His gaze, sharp and penetrating, never left the still glowing patient. "Needs a priest," the old healer finally said, his voice raspy, yet resonant. "A priest and a rosary blessed by the church." Alina frowned, her skepticism rising. She glanced at Rico, at the almost serene expression on his face, at the fading glow in his eyes, and then back at the insistent old man. Rico stirred again, his breathing shallow, his lips moving as if in a silent plea. A strange scratching sound filled the room, drawing Elena's attention back to the patient. It was as if claws were scraping against the metal frame of the hospital bed. Tita Lords, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice tight. "He's changing. He needs help." As Alina stood by Rico's bed, the storm's roar outside the hospital seemed to fade into the background. Her skepticism crumbling, she reached for his hand, surprised by its coldness. The scratching sound grew louder, more frantic. Then just as suddenly, it stopped. Outside, the wind screamed its fury, shaking the hospital to its core, but within the 4 walls of the emergency room, an unsettling silence had fallen. Lena felt a presence in the room with them, something ancient and powerful stirring in the darkness. Glancing at the old woman beside her, Alina saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, quickly replaced by a grim determination. "It's too late for a priest, Tita," Lord said, her voice grave. "But the rosary, it might still help," Rico moaned, his eyes fluttering open, revealing a depth of wildness that sent a shiver down Elena's spine. Before she could react, he lunged, his nails extended, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. "He's changing," Elena whispered, her voice laced with awe and terror. In the dimly lit emergency room, the battle between the modern world and ancient fears was about to begin. To be continued. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment below. Your support really means a lot. See you next time. The hospital in San Vicente had settled into an uneasy rhythm. By day, it was a symphony of beeping machines and murmured instructions. By night, it was a tomb of silence punctuated by the scratching of claws on concrete. Alina had almost gotten used to it. Almost she'd learned to navigate the hospital's quirks. Where to find the best Wi-Fi signal, where to buy the freshest eggs, and most importantly, where to stay out of sight during the power outages. But Rico remained an enigma, a puzzle she couldn't solve, a constant shadow at her side. By day he was charming, his soft smile disarming, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he talked about the Provincia's quiet beauty. The Corinderies steaming adobo, the Sorbatero's halo under the Niugean shade. His words were seasoned with salt and pepper, a dash of wit, a pinch of nostalgia, and Alina found herself believing him, wanting to believe him. His stories painted a picture so vivid, so heartwarming, that the city's cynicism that had become her shield crumbled just a little. But then night fell, and with it, Rico's room grew unnaturally still. The rhythmic scratching resumed, seeming to echo from within the walls, blending with the mournful howl of the Gubat. During rounds, she'd catch him staring at the ceiling, his eyes reflecting a strange hunger, glowing faintly in the moonlight streaming through the window. One night, as the wind outside picked up, whipping the acacia trees into a frenzy, Rico whispered, "You don't belong here, nurse." His voice was devoid of its usual warmth, heavy with an eerie finality that sent shivers down her spine. It was as if a predator had finally found its prey. Shaken, Alina sought solace in Tita Lords. The head nurse listened patiently, her fingers clutching a rosary, her gaze fixed on the floral tiles beneath the linoleum floor. Finally she looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and fear. "Aswang po ion, iha." They slip into human forms, you know, looking for blood, preying on the vulnerable, the sick, the desperate. Places like this hospital are their hunting grounds. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And they don't just take human form, iha. They can also enter a person, possess them, use them as vessels. The albulario returned then, his beads clacking softly as he sprinkled herbs near the ward, muttering about curses and young women. The transformation into a monster, the insatiable hunger that drove one to the brink. Alina nodded, trying to absorb his words, but her mind kept drifting back to Rico. Days blurred into nights. The barrio outside buzzed with rumors. The Sorbatero swore he saw bat-like shadows circling the hospital at dusk, its wings slicing through the night air, leaving behind the stench of decay. Villagers at the Curandaria spoke of a mancuculum in the Gubat, stirring unrest with dark magic. Lena tried to focus on her duties, checking IVs, changing bed sheets, balancing charts, but Rico's gaze followed her, unwavering, intense, unreadable. Then one evening, as the sky bled into twilight, the scratching sound filled Rico's room once more. Lena stood outside, frozen, as the scratching grew louder, more frantic, as if something was clawing its way to get out. Then silence. Heavy, thick, suffocating. When she finally entered the room, she found Rico standing by the window. His silhouette was elongated, almost inhuman, stretched and distorted like a nightmare-given form. He turned, and for a moment their eyes met. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes, which glittered with something wild, something dangerous. The other patients grew restless, their whispers weaving tales of sharp teeth and cold hands. One old woman woke with tiny bite marks on her arm, her eyes wide with terror. Later, Tita Lords pulled Alina aside. "He's not what he seems, Iha. Be careful." As night deepened, the hospital became a battleground between shadows. The fluorescent lights flickering, casting grotesque shapes that danced on the walls. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she entered Rico's room, the scratching sound still echoing in her ears. She adjusted his drip, his fingers brushed hers. They were cold, deliberate like the touch of a corpse. Outside, the growl of the Gubat reached a fever pitch, as if the forest itself was awakening, stirring in anticipation. Alina stumbled back, her gaze falling on the untouched meal by Rico's bed. A sudden memory flashed, the smell of garlic wafting from the kitchen, Rico's aversion to the dish, the way he winced when she mentioned garlic. Lena understood. The scratching, the hunger, the obsession, the garlic. Rico wasn't just an Aswang. He was something older, something hungrier. He was the Gubat, and the Gubat was him. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. Alina took a shaky breath, her reflection wavering in the glass partition, fear warred with fascination in her eyes. What was she doing? What was she witnessing? Is this the darkness that lurked beneath the placid surface of the Provincia, emerging to claim another soul? The days in San Vicente's hospital were blurring into one tense dance for Alina. The music was eerie and discordant, steps both familiar and unsettling. She moved through the hospital corridors with a growing unease, always aware of Rico's watching eyes at the end of the hallway. His charm had a sharper edge now, his soft Tagalog voice weaving tales of the Provincia, Esnogins, and starlit nights that drew her into late-night talks by his bedside. Rico talked about a curse that ran through his bloodline, vague hints of a dark lineage, his eyes locking onto hers with a mix of vulnerability and something unnerving she couldn't read. Alina felt her city pragmatism fraying. She missed the hum of traffic, the anonymity of the crowd. Here, in the hushed stillness of the barrio, she was acutely aware of the rustling leaves outside the window, the cawing of the crows, the whispers in the nipa swamps. Most of all, she was aware of Rico. His pain resonated within her, stirring a protective instinct that warred with a rising fear. Doubts gnawed at her. Patients in nearby beds woke up with bite marks, their whispers in the night haunted by shadows with glowing eyes. Then there were the dreams, the recurring dream of a swarm of insects with pincers and stingers sent by a mamba barang, Tita Lourdes had whispered, to turn Rico against her, to drive her away. One night, the dream became real. A buzzing filled the ward, a cloud of insects crawling through the open window. They swarmed around Rico's bed, but before they could reach him, the albulario appeared. A whirlwind of white gown and flying ointment, chasing the creatures away with chants and smoke. The smell of herbs and camphor lingered, but Rico's smile faltered. His gaze darted to the gubat outside, his knuckles whitening on the bedsheet. Fear rippled through the barrio like a curse. The sorbetero swore he saw a man flit through the Niogan, too fast to be human. His face hidden by the hood of his camisa de chino, Tinderong stopped delivering supplies, citing bad omens and hushed warnings. In the Carinderia, the women spoke in hushed voices of the Aswang Sapawai, the fire demon preying on the sick and the dying, stealing their souls and leaving behind empty husks. Alina could feel their eyes on her, their whispers like stones in her heart. Her nane, still recovering at home, called, "Ah!" Her voice trembled like a leaf in the wind. "Ah, ah!" The Provincia hides monsters in plain sight. The line went dead, leaving Alina with the echoing words and a chill that had nothing to do with the humid night. A quiet shift fell over the hospital. Alina sat beside Rico's bed, adjusting his fore. Their fingers brushed, and his touch, cold yet electric, sparked a pull within her she couldn't name. She found herself leaning closer, not just out of concern, but as if drawn by some unseen force. At the Carinderia, they called him an Aswang. They said he preyed on the sick, that he was too good to be true, that beneath his charming facade lurked something hungry and cruel. Over Elena's protests, Tita Lourdes pressed garlic into her pocket, her eyes pleading. "Watch him, Iha. He may be a patient, but the Gubat knows better than to enter a room with a holy cross. Not all demons fear God, Iha. Some have walked the earth for so long, they've learned to hide from the light." But it wasn't just the villagers' whispers that troubled her. It was Rico's stories. His life was bound by forces he couldn't control, a past that echoed in the present. Alina saw the pain in his eyes, the way he flinched at sudden movements, the tremors that ran through him in his sleep. Could this gentle giant, this man who spoke of poetry and stars, also be a monster? One night, the hospital's generator sputtered and died. In the sudden darkness, Alina saw him watching her, his eyes gleaming with that strange inner light. Fear quickened her pulse, yet she couldn't look away. His lips parted as if to speak, but the words died in his throat. When the generator hummed back to life, the room was filled with an unearthly quiet. Alina found herself holding his gaze, her own reflection staring back at her from his luminous eyes. The image jolted her, breaking the spell. She blinked, suddenly self-conscious. She knew she should be afraid, that this man with the haunting eyes was more myth than man. But in the quiet hum of the hospital, surrounded by shadows that danced in the moonlight, she felt a strange kinship with him, a shared sense of otherness. As the night deepened, the sounds of the Provincia pressed closer, the rustling leaves now a chorus of whispers, the crickets a droning hum. Trapped in the dim glow of the hospital lights with a monster by her side, Alina felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The hospital's sterile halls felt colder as Alina made her rounds, Rico's presence was a shadow that clung to her thoughts. The albulario Mang Diego cornered her in a dimly lit corridor. His bead necklaces clinked as he leaned close. His voice was a grave whisper. "That patient isn't a binatang. He's an Aswang, cursed by a Mancuculum to walk among us." He pointed to signs. Rico's wounds healing too fast. His refusal of garlic-laced meals, the way dogs outside the hospital howled in fear. Alina, a city girl through and through, scoffed, though her pulse quickened when she recalled Rico's glowing eyes. She dug into his records, finding little. Tinderong, who appeared in San Vicente months ago, coinciding with the vanishings in the sitio. That night, a power outage plunged the hospital into darkness. The hum of machines was silenced. Screams echoed from Rico's room, and Alina rushed in, flashlight trembling in her hand. He was convulsing, his body twisting, limbs elongating, fangs glinting in the beam, before collapsing back into human form, gasping, "Help me, ... it's taking over." Her heart pounded. Was this Yango, the cursed transformation Mongoli had spoken of? The old man arrived, his chants filling the air with smoke and the scent of herbs. His talisman glowed faintly. Rico's eyes pleaded with Alina, a mix of fear and desperation that rooted her to the spot. The lights flickered back on, but the hospital felt alive, its walls pulsing with unseen eyes. Tita Lourdes, clutching her rosary, urged Alina to stay away, but she couldn't. She questioned Rico, his vague answers about a family curse deepening her unease. The barrio outside was tense. Sorbetero avoided the hospital, claiming a bat-like shadow stalked the Nugan. Villagers at the Carindaria whispered of Mananage's gathering, their stakes ready. Elena's Nani called, her voice frail. "Anak, don't trust him." Yet Rico's gaze held her, his touch cold yet stirring, blurring the line between duty and danger. Over the next days she noticed patients growing weaker, their dreams filled with sharp teeth. Mang Diego's warnings echoed in her ears. On evening she caught Rico staring at a sleeping elder. His breath was too heavy. The growl of the gubat, answered by scratches in the walls. Lena gripped her syringe, her medical training clashing with the Provincial's mysteries. Could Rico really be an Aswang? Or were the villagers' beliefs blinding them? She found herself torn between two worlds, neither of which made sense. The albulario's ritual had calmed Rico, but his eyes still flickered. And Alina wondered if he was fighting the curse or luring her deeper into it. The hospital's fluorescent glow felt like a lie, hiding the truth of what lurked within. As she left his room, the air thickened, the Guat's shadows creeping closer. Alina knew San Vicente was no longer just a quiet barrio. It was a battleground where the lines between good and evil, human and monster, were blurred. And as Rico stirred in his bed, fangs glinting in the moonlight, she realized the fight was more than just a war of beliefs. It was a war for his soul, and in a twisted way, for hers too. Elena's heart wavered as she stood by Rico's bedside. The hospital's dim lights cast long shadows across his pale face. He confessed in whispers, his voice trembling. Bitten by an Aswang in the Gubat. He was fighting the Yanga, the curse twisting his soul into something hungry. His plea for help pierced her, and against her better judgment. She began smuggling herbs from Mang Diego's supplies, crushing them into salves to ease his convulsions. Their late-night talks grew intimate. Rico shared his loneliness, a mirror to Elena's own isolation in the Provincia. She found solace in his touch, cold yet steady on her hand, stirring a dangerous warmth she couldn't shake. But the hospital grew darker. A nurse vanished during her shift, found dazed in the Neogan with bite marks on her neck. Whispers turned to accusations. Villagers at the Carindaria pointed fingers at Rico, their fear fed by tales of Aswangs infiltrating the barrio. The Sorbetero refused to pass the hospital, claiming shadows moved in the Gubat, and the Tinderong's wares stayed locked away. Mananages arrived from a nearby sitio, their salt and steaks gleaming under the moon, their eyes fixed on Rico's ward. Lena Torn hid him in a cluttered storage room, her heart pounding as she defied Tita Lourdes' warnings. The Mancuculum's influence crept closer, her magic sending tick-belong illusions, horse-headed shadows that confused the staff, making charts vanish and lights flicker. Rico's gaze held gratitude, but his eyes still glowed faintly, a reminder of the curse within. Elena's Nene called, her voice sharp, "Anak, you're playing with fire." Yet, she couldn't abandon him, her city logic crumbling under the Provincia's mysteries. Patience grew weaker, their dreams haunted by claws and whispers, and Alina caught Rico staring at them, his breath heavy with restraint. Mang Diego's chants echoed in the halls, his talisman warm in her pocket, but the hospital felt like a trap. The gubbit's howls answered the Tikbalong's laughter, and insects buzzed at the windows, the mamba burring spies watching. Alina mixed more herbs, her hands trembling, knowing each dose risked her career, her safety. Rico's touch, cold yet steady, anchored her, but doubt gnawed within. Was she saving a man or enabling a monster? The Mananagi's footsteps grew louder, their murmurs filling the barrio. The Carinderia fell silent. Sorbatero's bell stilled. Alina stood guard over Rico, the storage room's shadows closing in, her heart caught in an unholy alliance. The Provincia's secrets pulsed around them, the hospital no longer a haven but a battleground. And Alina knew the line between healer and prey was thinning, with Rico's fate and her own teetering on the edge. The hospital in San Vicente trembled under a blood-red moon. Its halls echoed with panic as the Menanges locked the doors, their stakes and salt ready for a siege. The Aswangs drawn by Rico's presence breached the walls, their bat-like forms screeching through shattered windows. Elena's pulse raced as she gripped Mang Diego's talisman, its warmth her only anchor. Rico, his eyes flickering with the Yanga's glow, confessed his truth. Sent by the Mancuculum to corrupt the barrio, he'd been swayed by Elena's kindness, resisting the curse that urged him to feed. His voice broke, torn between shame and defiance, and she saw the man beneath the monster, her heart caught in a reckless trust. The hospital erupted into chaos, patients screamed, monitors crashed, and the stench of blood filled the air. Rico transformed, his limbs elongating, fangs bared, but he turned on his kin, claws slashing through Aswangs in the corridors. Alina, defying her fear, joined the fray, her syringe loaded with Mang Diego's herbal antidote, its sharp scent cutting through the chaos. The Managis fought fiercely, their salt burning the creatures. But the Mancuculum's laughter echoed from the Gubat, her magic fueling the assault. Tita Lourdes barricaded the staff in the break room, her rosary trembling in her hands, while the Sorbatero's cart lay abandoned outside, its bell silent. Alina dodged a lunging Aswang, its eyes like Rico's but devoid of humanity, and injected it with the antidote, watching it collapse, writhing. Rico shielded her, his strength faltering as wounds opened across his chest, his human side fighting to hold on. Mang Diego's chants rose, the talisman flaring to drive back the Tikbalong illusions weaving through the halls. The Carendria's lights flickered across the street, a faint reminder of the barrio's fragile normalcy. Elena's hands shook as she tended Rico's wounds mid-battle, his cold touch steadying her despite the horror. He whispered her name, his voice a plea, and she saw love in his eyes, a spark that defied the curse. The Managis cornered an Aswang near the ward, their stakes piercing its heart. But Rico's fight was for Alina, his claws tearing through his former kin. The Mancuculum's presence loomed closer, her insects buzzing at the edges of the chaos. Alina clutched the talisman, its heat burning her palm, and stood by Rico, her syringe raised. The hospital's walls groaned, the gubbit's howls a deafening chorus, and she knew this night would decide their fate. The Provincia's secrets had erupted into war, and Alina, a city nurse thrust into its heart, fought not just for survival, but for the man whose humanity hung by a thread, tethered to her own. The first light of dawn crept over San Vicente. The hospital's battered halls fell silent as the Aswangs retreated into the Gubat, their screeches fading with the blood-red moon. Rico slumped against a wall, his body human again, blood seeping from wounds that no longer healed unnaturally. Alina knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she bandaged his chest. The talisman's warmth faded in her pocket. He confessed fully, his voice raw. Sent by the Mancuculum to sow chaos, he'd been swayed by Elena's compassion, fighting the Yango that threatened to consume him. His eyes, no longer glowing, held a quiet sorrow as he handed her a crumpled note, his gratitude scrawled in shaky script. Mang Diego, exhausted from hours of chanting, performed a final ritual, severing Rico's ties to the curse with herbs and a whispered prayer. The Mananages, their stakes bloodied, eyed him warily but retreated, their hunt satisfied for now. Tita Lourdes emerged from the break room, her rosary still clutched tight, and helped Alina tend to the shaken patients. Outside, the Carindria across the street flickered to life, the Sorbatero's cart untouched, a symbol of the barrio's fragile return to normalcy. Elena's Nene, recovered at home, called with relief, unaware of the night's horrors. The hospital bore scars-shattered windows, claw marks on walls, but its pulse steadied, the air no longer thick with the Mancuculum's malice. Rico vanished before sunrise. His note all that remained, leaving Alina to grapple with their banda, mix of terror and tenderness that lingered like a bruise. She replayed his touch, cold yet grounding, and wondered if she'd saved a man or lost herself to a monster's charm. The Gubat loomed beyond the Neogon, its shadows holding secrets the Albulario could only hint at. Villagers trickled back, whispering of the siege, the Tinderong spinning tales of heroism at the market. Alina resumed her duties, her city pragmatism shaken, her heart heavy with Rico's absence. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed to life, but the wards felt different, as if the Provincia's mysteries had seeped into the walls. Mang Diego warned of lingering threats. Tikbalong's laughter still echoed in the forest. The Mancuculam's defeat might draw others. Alina nodded, her syringe steady, but her thoughts adrift. The barrio carried on, children playing near the Carinderia, the Sorbatero's bell ringing faintly. Yet as she walked the halls, Rico's note in her pocket, Alina felt the weight of the night's revelations. San Vicente was no longer just a quiet provinciate, was a place where monsters wore human faces. And her compassion had been both her strength and her vulnerability, leaving her forever changed. As days turned into weeks, Alina found solace in routine, the rhythmic beeping of machines a counterpoint to the silence echoing within her. The barrio slowly healed, the wounds of the attack a fading memory, but Alina couldn't shake off the feeling that something, or someone, was watching her. The line between the mundanity of her city life and the unsettling folklore of San Vicente had blurred, leaving her in a constant state of unease. The warmth of the people, the lush greenery, even the vibrant colors of the market seemed to hold a hidden menace, a stark contrast to the gleaming sterility of Manila. One evening, while tending to a feverish patient, Alina felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Glancing out the window, she saw a figure standing beneath the lone tree at the edge of the hospital grounds, a silhouette against the fiery hues of sunset. It was a man, tall and lean, and something about his posture, the way he held himself, seemed oddly familiar. Could it be? Had one of the Aswangs returned? Or was it just her hyperactive imagination playing tricks on her? The question swirled in her mind, but there was duty to be done. With a deep breath, she turned away from the window, dismissing the image as a figment of her fear-ridden imagination. But as the days passed, the sightings continued. Alina caught a glimpse of him. He was there. An enigmatic presence that seemed to materialize out of thin air. His face, partially obscured by the wide brim of his hat, offered no clues. Was he a townsperson, come to seek help, a weary traveler passing through? Or was he, as her gut instinct screamed Rico, the thought both terrified and intrigued her. The idea that the very monster she'd helped escape the forest was now haunting her. She fought the urge to look, to confront the apparition that was steadily becoming a fixture in her life. Then one rainy afternoon, as Alina made her way through the teeming market, their eyes met. His were pools of molten gold, intense and fathomless. Startled, she instinctively took a step back, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. They're face to face with the enigma that had invaded her thoughts. She saw not a monster, but a man, etched with weariness and haunted by a sorrow that mirrored her own. Many years have passed since then. Scars on the hospital walls have faded like old wounds, though Alina remains here in San Vicente. Her dreams of conquering the big city have been traded for the slower rhythm of life in the province. Now, the head nurse, she moves through the wards with a steady hand. The crisp white of her uniform, a constant amid the ebb and flow of the busy barrio. Outside, life goes on. The Carinderia thrives. Laughter mingles with the aroma of its famous adobo. The Sorbatero's cheerful tune rings out through the neogun, his bell music to the ears of weary travelers. Yet once the sun sets and the full moon hangs heavy in the sky, a chill seems to settle over Alina. Thoughts of Rico brush against her like a sudden breeze, bringing with them the scent of rain and the memory of his cold touch. His note of gratitude, carefully tucked away in her drawer, is a tangible link to a past she can't escape. The Gubat, with its looming presence, casts long shadows across her memories. Some nights, the wind whispers tales of Aswangs and Tikbalangs. Their howls pierce the stillness, chilling her to the bone. One evening, Mang Diego, now frailer, but no less fervent, visits the hospital. His rosary beads clacking softly as he steps into the wards. He warns that some patients may be harboring lingering curses, their illnesses not entirely of this world. Manages may be gone, but their malevolent spirits linger, feeding on fear and despair. Alina listens, her gaze steady and sure. She knows that in this isolated place, the line between faith and superstition is a blurry one. Her Nane, fully recovered and brimming with the energy of her youth, urges Alina to return to Manila. The province has held on to her for too long, her mother believes, and it's time for her to spread her wings and fly. But the Provincia has woven its magic around Elena's heart. She's become an integral part of this community, her bravery during the siege still a hushed whisper in the wind. Days turn into weeks, the heat of summer yielding to the soft caress of autumn. Alina continues her work training new nurses and tending to the sick. She teaches them to watch for the subtle signs of darkness, unhealing wounds, eyes that glow with an otherworldly light. While her own heart carries the weight of Rico's absence, has he survived the encounter with the Mancuculum? Is he free of the Yango? Or has the Gubat swallowed him whole? As the night deepens, the hospital hums with the soft murmur of activity. A baby cries, a cough echoes in the darkness, and Elena's senses sharpen, tuned to the smallest sound, the faintest stir. The people of San Vicente are a resilient lot, yet they remain wary. Superstition clings to them like a second skin. Alina hears snippets of conversation, tales of strange occurrences in the night, and she wonders if the darkness is stirring. Sensing the vulnerability of those who dwell in the light, some patients speak of unsettling dreams, of encounters with shadowy figures that prowl their bedsides. Alina finds herself questioning the boundaries of the unseen world. Are these stories mere figments of an overactive imagination, or do they hold a grain of truth? The hospital, once a beacon of safety and healing, now feels like an island in a sea of darkness. Its fluorescent lights humming steadily, bravely pushing back the encroaching gloom. With each passing day, Alina feels the weight of the unknown pressing against her. A constant reminder of the fragility of life and the thin veneer of civilization that separates us from the primal forces of nature. She walks home through the Niogan, the rhythmic crash of the waves a distant echo in the stillness. The salty breeze caressing her face, carrying with it the scent of distant storms. The full moon hangs like a ghostly lantern in the inky sky. The trees lining the path seem to reach out with gnarled fingers, their shadows dancing and twisting on the ground. Alina quickens her pace, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The silence is broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant call of an owl, a lonely sentinel of the night. As she turns the corner onto her street, the faint murmur of voices reaches her ears. Laughter, hushed and cautious, mingles with the strumming of a guitar. Lena's heart lifts slightly. The Provincia is a place of mystery and shadows, but life here is resilient, tenacious, refusing to be extinguished. In the face of adversity, the people find ways to persevere, to find joy in the simplest of pleasures.